Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. My name is Anna and today I want to share this August bullet journal theme with you, which is a black background theme with bright flowers and leaves and some foil paints. I always start to gravitate towards darker designs around this time of the year, and we'll start from the cover spread that we're first fully gonna cover with these black papers. The paper I use is pretty thin. It's not much thicker than regular copy paper, so even when applied to multiple pages, it doesn't bulk the journal too much, which is great. I used this dot liner type of adhesive to attach the papers to the journal, and after that I took a black marker and colored the white center gap between the papers. If you add the paper too close to the center, I find that it might be a little bit difficult to close the journal, so I think this is a pretty good way to get rid of most of that white color. But then we can jump to the flower arrangement here on the right page. I used gouache paints, which we can apply right on top of the black paper, and I showed the paints I was using here. However, you could achieve a very similar result with different colors too, so don't worry if you don't have the exact colors I'm using. I sketched out this flower arrangement a little bit out of the camera, mainly to know where I wanted to add all the biggest flowers and leaves, and then we can get started with these warm red tones. I mixed a little bit of burnt sienna with my red shade to get this slightly muted, fiery red color, and then we'll just go right in and start painting these flower petals. I'm not exactly sure which flowers these are, maybe some type of poppies, but anyway, I always find that the colors dry a little bit differently when you paint on a black background. For example, here this red shade dried much more orangey than the initial color, and then when I added some darker stripes with the burnt umber shade, it didn't really show up until the paint dried. So it's just a little bit different experience painting on black paper rather than white. But at the same time, I find that somehow the black background really elevates any painting. I think this whole arrangement ended up much more eye-catching than if I had painted it against a light background. Also, I think some stripes in the paints don't matter at all here, and more than anything, just adds a little bit of texture to the flowers. I really liked how these red flowers looked so far, but now it's time to start adding all the other elements. I was kind of nervous to add these leaves and other details because I didn't want to ruin anything, and I was also painting directly to the page, so there was a bit of extra pressure. This won't look too promising for a while here, but I think this is one of those painting styles where you kind of need to trust the process, because all the small details and light colors we'll add at the end will transform the whole page. So I was just slowly working on these leaves and later started to add some smaller daisy looking flowers to fill in some of the space even further. I tried to keep all the shapes really simple and minimal, which was pretty much my approach for this whole monthly theme. I needed something pretty mindless and low pressure this month that I could achieve in a fairly short amount of time, so that's why we're trying to go for this pretty minimalistic approach. I was mainly using my Etcher Lab gouache brushes, which I've been really enjoying lately, but one problem with them is that the white handle gets dirty pretty easily. I haven't been able to remove some of the stains even with soap, so in that sense, brushes with a black handle stay looking prettier for longer. But now that all the main shapes are on the paper, it's time to move on to the details, and I'm so excited to share these new foil paints with you that I just received before starting to film this video. Milena, who's the owner of this small handmade foil paint business, reached out to me and so kindly offered to send some of her paints for free. And oh my god, my jaw dropped when I saw all these colors she sent to me. She gave me 2 whole sets that come in these tin boxes, and then she sent 3 of these mini dot packs that I'd guess still last you quite a while. I swatched all of them on the same black paper, and these are just super quick 1-layer swatches, so the paints are for the most part really pigmented and easy to work with. There are also a few glimmer toppers, duochrome shades, and this holographic selection that was so difficult to capture on camera. Also, on top of everything, she offered you guys a 10% discount code, which you can find from the description. So definitely go show some love to her small business if you've been looking for high quality foil paints. This video is not sponsored or anything. I just simply received these for free and want to share them with you guys. But now back to the painting. So I decided to use 3 colors from the Gemstone collection that I felt was the most on my alley. So we are starting with this gold shade, and I added this to the centers of the big flowers and then started to paint some simple smaller shapes to fill in the empty spaces. I didn't really have a plan for these flowers, so I ended up adding a bit too much of the color, so I will later cover some of that with black paint and clean this up a bit. But yeah, as you can see, these paints perform really well. I couldn't see pretty much any difference with the foil paints I've used this far, except that I think these might have been even a little bit easier to get out of the pan. Sometimes you need to let water sit on the paint for a while to loosen enough of those shimmer particles, but I didn't have any problem with the pigmentation of the colors I was using here. Also, I tried my best to leave some black gaps between the individual shapes here, because I think that's a way to add to the minimalistic look and to keep the shapes looking as sharp as possible. I then continued with these orange peach toned leaves that I started to add here and there, and at the end I finished everything with a few green dots around the painting. whole page is still not completely balanced. There's quite a lot of space in the bottom corner and around the top, but I didn't really know what to add there, so to not make things worse, I decided to put down the brush and move on to the calendar side. I had a few of these colored papers I've printed before, and I ended up going with this orange peach tone paper that we'll use for a monthly calendar. I know this is probably not enough room for all of you guys, but I only write the most important deadlines and events to the monthly calendar, so having a smaller one works for me perfectly. And then I took this darker cream paper that I used to write a big cursive August title. I thought a cursive font complemented the flowers this time, so we're gonna use a similar font all throughout this video. I was loosely taking inspiration from this font called the Signature, so you can probably find the alphabet for it if you Google the name. But after the calendar was done, we have finally finished the first spread of this month. I know this is maybe a little bit more minimal than some of my previous themes. I thought this spread looked slightly empty, and maybe adding some small flowers around the title and calendar would have added more visual interest, but as I mentioned, I tried not to use too much time with this theme, so I decided to leave it here and move on to the next spread. So this is when I decided that I actually wanted to attempt to do a fully black background theme. So we're gonna start here by cutting this middle page in half to create a Dutch door, and then I went ahead and covered all these pages with the black paper. My edges were not perfect. It was surprisingly difficult to line all these black papers perfectly, so I had to cut out some of the small white pieces from the sides, but that's okay. And then I rounded all the corners with this corner punching tool, and again colored the middle gaps with a black pen. The problem I have with these black pages is that I hate writing with a white pen. I think it's so messy and difficult, so we are gonna add a bunch of lighter colored paper on top of the background for all the writing space. I know that this might seem a bit pointless, which it probably is, but I was inspired, so we're gonna ignore the lack of functionality this time. Anyway, after the black background was done, I once again started by painting some flowers, because these will go under all the boxes we'll add. And this time I wanted to change it up slightly, so we're gonna start with these bigger daisy looking flowers and then paint some small red flowers. So kinda reverse from what we did on the cover spread. I didn't use white here, so instead I mixed this kind of gray shade with some of the orange as well. I thought this will look a little bit softer than pure white, and also gave the option of adding some lighter highlights on top of some parts of these petals. But other than that, I don't really have much to say here. I think the shapes are pretty straightforward for the most part, and I was just having fun playing around with these different flower and leaf styles. The red flowers are pretty quick and loose, and again, I started with a little bit darker layer and then added this brighter red more towards the tips or other high points of these flowers to add some very subtle dimension. Then I took out the cream shades again and painted some leaves here around the flowers. I kept these ones a little bit smaller and tried to go for a slightly looser style again. Then we'll fill in all the gaps with some easy shapes and dots with the foil paints. After finishing all the decorations here in the bottom corner, I added just a few matching ones to the opposite top corner. There will be a title and white box going here later, so I focused most of the elements along the edges of the page. But after that, let's start to set up the planning sections that I want to use in August. I started with these small boxes that I'm gonna use for habit tracking, so I'll just draw a weekly grid here freehand, and I'll use this by drawing a circle every day I do these habits. Then before jumping to the middle section, I took out the foil paint again and used this to write these big planning and reflection titles at the top of these pages. I definitely recommend sketching out the titles if you plan to use a watercolor brush. It can be pretty tricky to keep the letters even when the brush is so flimsy, but I was just trying to work slowly and carefully go over any lines that needed some polishing. But then I glued a few more boxes here on the planning side. I'll use this first dot grid box to write about my monthly focus. However, recently I felt like having a weekly focus or almost like a weekly overview plan has been more useful for me. I think it somehow works with my brain a little bit more. So that's why I'm gonna use these 4 light green boxes for a short weekly overview. I really like the idea of having a clear theme for each week, so it might be a design week or filming week for me. Or for example, last week I had a pretty intense shop restock and sale order packing week. So yeah, that's something I'll try to keep up next month. I used these alphabet stickers from my own shop and these number stickers from Ikigai Papier. I know some of the letter cut lines look a little bit off-centered, and that's just because I often take the sheets for myself that have some cutting errors. I don't sell the sheets where the cut lines are this off, so maybe not the best advertisement for my shop, but now you know. It also did hurt me a little bit that these numbers are slightly the wrong color for this theme. I didn't have any number stickers that fully matched the warm red colors, so this is what we're going with. I'm trying to tell myself that it's not so serious. But then before filling the other side of the Dutch door, I thought it was a good moment to set up the right side here, and I'm actually gonna try out this daily sleep tracker here. So I wrote out the hours that I slept from 4 to 9 hours to the top, and then the numbers on the side are for the days in August. So I'll draw some kind of dot here every day and maybe connect the dots with a line or something. I haven't had a tracker like this in a while in my journal, so I'm kind of excited about it. And then we can really quickly set up the reflection side here that I'll fill at the very end of August to look back and wrap up my thoughts and feelings about the month. I've kept these pages quite simple for the past few months because I haven't had much motivation to fill these up, to be honest. So to make sure that I at least write something down, I try to keep these quite brief. I usually like to have a section for any open journaling about my current thoughts and feelings, and then list a few of the highs and lows of the month. I think these different colored papers added a fun, colorful touch to this theme, which really helps when you want to keep the overall decorations pretty minimal. And in the end, I really like how this section ended up. The black background just looks so stunning to me, and without knowing, it's hard to imagine that it's all done on a white journal. But anyway, now we have one more section to go through, which are the weekly pages of August. I've actually been really inspired to use my weekly pages recently. I don't know what happened, but I've been really enjoying having a more detailed to-do list and more room to write about things each day in general. So I'm keeping the weekly section very similar to what I had last month. it means that we're gonna start by cutting some Dutch doors again. I'll include 5 weeks in this August setup, so I'll include the end of July, beginning of August week here. And after cutting out the correct number of pages, I once again covered the first and last page with the black paper. I didn't bother doing it for these weekly Dutch door sections. As I mentioned earlier, I don't like to use white pens to write in my journal, so it will be much easier to have the white dot grid background for all the space I'll use a lot. I did glue a white paper piece on top of this last page, which was just a little bit easier than tracing the shape out of the black paper like I did last month, I think. So yes, I did sacrifice 1 page from the back of this journal to do this, but it's not necessary. I was just being lazy. I actually realized later that I should have painted the decorations on this spread before attaching this white paper, but luckily it didn't cause that much trouble. But before doing those decorations, I'll kinda start with this first page here, which still won't be a weekly spread. Something I felt like was missing from my last setup was room for any random notes, so I actually had to scribble some at the back of my journal, which is why I wanted to leave some room for those as well. I also did go ahead and write another foil cursive title here at the top, and then I attached this orange paper on the first page. I didn't think I'll need these 2 pages just for notes, so I actually used this orange box to list some of my current hobbies and stuff that I'm consuming. So I wrote currently reading, knitting and watching, and I'm kind of excited to fill this up throughout the month. But then we'll actually jump to the decorations. I know I'm kind of jumping all over the place here, but I thought having the decorations down would help with choosing the rest of the colors on these pages. So we're gonna paint some flowers again. I started with this 1 bigger red flower and then painted some leaves and tiny daisy flowers around it. Because I don't have much to say about this anymore, I use the same paints and brushes. I'll let you listen to some relaxing background music instead. But now that all the decorations are done, I quickly finished up the first spread. So I added this random color palette with these colored dots from my shop, and then I drew these orange lines to the notes page. But after that, the only thing we have left is to set up the actual weekly layout. As I mentioned, I followed pretty much the exact same setup I had for July because this worked for me very well, but I did make a small addition by adding room for the time I woke up and the time I went to sleep. So the numbers on the left side are the hours of the day that I will loosely use to arrange my daily tasks and do some time blocking maybe. And for me, it also works very well to divide the day with the lunch and dinner times. So those are the horizontal lines that I drew with a brush pen. I do this so I'm able to divide my day into morning, afternoon, and evening tasks. That just works well with my brain and lifestyle. So yeah, that's all for the weekly section. I will probably set up the upcoming weeks in a very similar way, so I'll do that later off camera, which means that we are finally done with this dark August flower theme. I think this ended up being quite a fall appropriate setup. I'm starting to be kind of over all the bright spring and summer colors, so I hope you don't mind. Also, this theme will be available as a digital version on my shop and Patreon as always. You can find links to those in description. But other than that, I guess that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a lovely day or night wherever you are, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye bye!